Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you my review of the AllPowers S2000 Pro, then also their 400-watt solar panel. My review here today. At this point, I've spent time with quite a number of different brands in their solar generators or portable power stations, however you want to refer to them. And so at this point, I have a pretty good sense of, I think, what people are looking for, certainly what I'm looking for. And this is a unit that has some strengths and a few weaknesses that I'll try to highlight as a part of this review. The strengths of this include a large 1500 watt-hour capacity that gives you 2400 watts of continuous AC output or up to 4000 watts of surge power. It does have the UPS function that allows you to have an uninterrupted power supply to make sure that things like a computer or some other kind of sensitive device, you don't have to worry about a power outage causing damage to it. It has very rapid recharge, up to 1500 watts of input via AC power. It has no external AC power brick, and so allows you to plug right into it, and it even has a 30 amp RV plug at the front. Now, weaknesses include slightly clunky controls and a few charging quirks that we'll detail as a part of the review. Let's start, however, by looking at the basic specs here. Obviously, the larger you go in terms of the power capacity of these batteries, the heavier they become. So in this case, I would call this unit it's perfectly movable, but it's not what I would call light. And obviously, how far you're going to move it is going to depend on, how desperate you are, number one, and also how strong you are. But it weighs in at 14.5 kilograms, or about 32 pounds. And so that's not lightweight, but neither is it immovable. And certainly compared to equivalent generators in terms of the power output, it is moderately sized. In terms of that overall footprint, it is 37.5 by 24.5 by 25 centimeters, or right under 15 inches by 9.6 inches by 9.8. And so not huge, as you can see, but not small either. As noted, it has a 1500 watt-hour capacity and gives up to 2400 watts of continuous pure sine wave power and up to 4000 watts peak, though that's a little harder to test because, as we're going to see, this powers a lot of things within that standard that you have already at the 2400 watts of output. It has 4 standard AC plugs here across the front. These are all 110 volts, and obviously you can do a combined up to 2400 watts there. It also has the 130 amp plug. That's also 110 volt, by the way, but RV type plug, and that comes in handy for a couple of things that I'll detail in just a moment. It has 40 USB-A ports in the front, and so those have a couple of different delivery standards. Up to the higher output ones will give you 5 volts, 2.4 amp output of power. There are 2 USB-C ports with a power delivery standard. These are 5 volt, 20 amp output ports that will give you up to 100 watts at the power delivery standard. It has 1 car output covered up here, which is a 13 volt, 10 amp output. So a lot of different ways to power a variety of devices, obviously. And then it also has the AC input, which is in the back, and it's just a standard plug-in. There's no external power brick, as noted. And it has 1 Anderson solar input that allows you to charge via solar at up to 650 watts of input, which is actually quite high for a unit like this, which is going to come to the strengths here that we'll talk about in just a moment, and that is how rapidly you can recharge this particular device, which is very important for a lot of reasons. Finally, one thing I'll note that is missing here that some competitors have, and that is there is no wireless charge option. So you're not going to be able to just set your phone or something similar on the front and do inductive power delivery through that. So some of the strengths is that it can suck electrons really, really fast, a whole lot faster than some competitors, up to 1500 watts via AC input. And just to give you an idea of how fast that is, that means you can recharge this whole thing to completion in only about an hour and a half via that 1500 watt input. That's really, really fast. And there are certain situations where if you have a narrow window where you need to get it recharged for one reason or another, that can be incredibly important. And it's an area where I've been let down by some other power stations in the past. In one instance, for example, I had an inspector coming and I was using a unit like this for a power backup on a job site, and I needed to have a certain standard for the fire safety. And as a byproduct, because we had already ran a test earlier to see how long it could run things, it took so long to recharge that I didn't have enough power to actually run the test when the inspector was there, which caused me some problems. A unit like this, you wouldn't have a problem because you can recharge it really, really fast. I live in Ontario, Canada. This is not exactly the solar capital of the world. And so for me, even on a good sunny day, it's more like 4 to 5 hours of charging. That's with this 400 amp panel. That's if you actually had 600 watts of input going in, you probably could hit that 3-hour standard. But just using the AllPowers 400 watt panel and then this, it takes me, you know, like I said, probably around 5 hours to accomplish that, which is still quite good, all things considered. Now, on the note of the solar panel itself, I actually really like this. Now, understand that it is big, as you can see here. The footprint is large. It's not too bad when it is folded up, which I'll detail in just a moment. But what I like about this is that in most cases, other brands that I have reviewed, they're relying on multiple solar panels to accomplish this. So while this is big and it is heavy, it is nearly 50 pounds to carry it. That's 21.4 kilograms. So yeah, that's hefty. However, because it has a good handle and it folds up in a nice sturdy package, it's actually not terrible to move, at least to me. But what I like is that you're not having to work with carrying out multiple panels and then wiring them, you know, into parallel or series to run power back. And so you can get all of it out of here. So it just makes for a really straightforward setup. So as you can see, there are 5 taller panels that are a part of this. Each one of these has a kickstand. And so as you can see, it's just a matter of folding it back like this. And then when you get to the end, there is a couple of straps that just come in and plug in like that, and that keeps it stable. And so you actually only end up with one of the kickstands that are Velcro attached that expose in the back. You have a really large pouch here, but because you have a really sturdy carry handle, while that's not light, it is manageable. So there's something to consider there. So a quick demonstration of the most effective way to actually set this up in array, considering that it is kind of big and clunky. You start with this right here, and so if you start with the first kickstand out, and then as you move towards the second kickstand, go ahead and set that out. And so once you've established 2 of them here, and make sure that they're actually setting in place and so supporting, that way as each one, as you bring it out and fold it over, just set it like this, so on and so forth. And so that way, it allows you to array it all out at the same time without having any kind of issue there. So a couple of notes on the actual solar panel itself. First of all, it has very good power efficiency, 22% power efficiency. And so even on, you know, kind of the weather around here that I've seen lots of days where I'm getting 340, 350 watts out of it. It also is relatively inexpensive for a 400 watt panel, which is obviously going to be a lot of people's favorite part. Now, going back to the actual unit itself here, the big advantage of a larger unit like this is that if you're using it, for example, in a power outage or even while camping or, you know, for an RV, this can power a lot of things. In fact, about 99% of household appliances fall under this, 2400 watt output minimum. So I tested a variety of common items, including a toaster, which was 0 problem, had no issue with that. I did a 1100 watt blender, Ninja blender, 0 problems with that. And then what has been kind of the benchmark, I actually have an electric tea kettle which has about a 1500 watt demand, which is heavy enough that a lot of these power stations don't run it. I had 0 problems in powering it from the AllPowers S2000 Pro. Now, the other thing about this that's somewhat unique is the fact that it does have this 30 amp RV plug. And you say, so what's the use of that? Well, for one thing, if you happen to drive an EV, an electric vehicle, having one of these around might actually be really useful, because you can actually recharge off that 30 amp, because you can plug into that. You actually could potentially recharge something like a Tesla, for example, if you have run out of power, and it might give you enough to be able to limp into an actual power station to charge it. You can get anywhere between 12 and 14 kilometers of driving out of that, you know, around 8 miles or so, which, you know, might be enough to get you to a power station. So, I mean, that's one application that could be very handy. The other thing is that there are a lot of people that actually might want to use this for an RV. There are a number of RV parks that won't allow you to run a generator after dark. Well, obviously this has almost no noise associated with it, so it would allow you to still plug into it and keep some things running overnight during a time when a typical gas-powered generator might not work for you. And so that's another option there. In terms of the actual battery structure here, a couple of positives there. That is, we have 2,500 plus cycles before you reach about an 80%, or it can only charge to 80%. And to give you an idea of how long that is, it's about 10 years charging it, one power cycle per day. And so this is going to last you for a long time. Most people's use is not that heavy, one charge per day. So this is something that theoretically could last you for a really, really long time without having to worry about the batteries breaking down. It also has a very effective power or battery management system, a BMS system inside. And that's just going to keep you from doing stupid things like getting yourself shocked, but also doing wrong wiring things or operating things when they're wet and they're dangerous. It just is very effective at keeping all of those things out. And we'll give you some information on the LCD in the front. It also has app control and monitoring. Now this is Bluetooth, not Wi-Fi, so it's more you have to be in the proximity of the unit. You can't monitor it from your home while it's on another site, for example. But if you're within Bluetooth range, you can remotely monitor it. You can turn it on and off, things like that. You can see how much more battery life you have, etc. All of those things. So let's talk about some of the things that I didn't love, just practical things over about 5 or 6 weeks of testing at this point. I found that turning on the AC power, that's the middle button there, is kind of quirky in that while the DC power will come on with just kind of one slightly long touch, the AC power requires like a long press of about 3 seconds. And that seems like a really long time. And so if you only hit 2 seconds and nothing comes on, it can be a little bit frustrating. The other thing that's frustrating for me is that one of the things that I like to charge, I actually have the Milwaukee M18 fuel lawnmower. And so it actually has 2 very large 12 amp hour batteries that are a part of that. And so as a byproduct of that, I have a rapid charger from Milwaukee that can suck electrons really fast. But what I find is that with that rapid charger, which has its own built-in fan, and then this has its built-in cooling system, is that for whatever reason, there's a quirk in between that. If I'm running that, even once the batteries are fully charged, it will continue to draw quite a bit of current because for whatever reason, the fans keep running on the Milwaukee fast charger in a way that they don't when I'm just plugged into normal AC power. So it continues to draw, and if I'm not careful, if I have just gone away and left the house, for example, it will continue to drain the battery down all the way till 0. So that can be very frustrating there. So something to watch out for. When you're outside charging, I do find that the display washes out fairly easily in direct sunlight, which makes it kind of hard to evaluate what your state of charge is. In that case, you might be better off to use the app and just monitor it in that way where you can look at your phone screen rather than trying to look at this. I also found that I would see sometimes some inconsistent power delivery results at the lower percentages to where the battery life doesn't, sometimes it will just go to 0 much quicker than what I expect. And so it's not always entirely reliable to evaluate on that, particularly if you're using something that is higher draw to where it doesn't seem to keep up on monitoring it quite as well as what I would like. I also found that typically these kind of units have been pretty bulletproof in terms of charging things like my cameras or tablets and things like that. Obviously, I do a lot of tech reviews, so I charge a lot of different devices. And typically with these things, I don't have to worry about the power delivery standard, but I actually find that with this, I have to make sure to choose the right between the 2 USB-C power delivery plugs. They don't output power in the exact same way. And so I find I have to switch between them depending on the device itself. And that's something that I thought was behind me with these. So it's a little quirk that I don't enjoy all that much. Also, you might want to know that this is not a weatherproof device. It's not rainproof. They do include a rain cover to go over it, but the unit itself is not weather resistant. It's not IP rated. The panels are, but this is not. And so as a byproduct, you may have to be a little bit more careful about an outdoor application if you're in inclement weather. The other thing that's just kind of a design flaw here is that if you're using the 30 amp plug here, it can actually cover over the port where you're going to have your solar panel power coming in. And so you might run into a situation where you can't use both of those things at the same time, which is just a design flaw there. So a few quirks to be aware of. Price point here, we're about between $1,600 and $1,700 US dollars or 2,300 Canadian, though I will note that there are often coupon promotions that will dramatically lower that price, including right now for the first few weeks after this review through the end of August. You can use the code Dustin Abbott to get 25% off. And so obviously that significantly lowers the price, making this very, very competitive. So my conclusion is this: some of the fine details are not as smoothly implemented as some competitors, but this also packs in a lot of the important things that they don't always get right. It does some things really, really well, like receiving and outputting power, which is kind of the, the main deal here with these kind of units. So I consider this to be a worthy option, particularly if you can get it on sale. Kind of the main ingredients are well covered here, and just there's a little bit of quirks in some of the overall handling, but once you figure those out, I think you can live with it. I'm Dustin Abbott, and I hope that this has helped you out and helped you to make an informed buying decision if you're considering the AllPowers S2000 Pro unit or their 400-watt solar panels. I will link to some buying options in the description down below if you want to purchase one for yourself. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching. Have a great day, and let the light in.